You are walking around carrying a secret inside your DNA that terrifies the powers that be. We are talking about a fundamental truth that has been intentionally covered up, buried under layers of concrete and deception, serving as the literal bedrock for every major empire that rules the modern world today. And let me be clear, this isn't another sad story about your trauma or a lecture on how much you have suffered at the hands of others. No, this secret reveals the ancient lineage of dominion and authority that flows through your veins, shifting the focus away from what they stole to what they can never touch. We are discussing an inheritance that is impossible to confiscate because it is woven into your spirit. The only weapon they have is your own amnesia. Society has spent billions programming you to believe your biography starts in shackles on a boat, but that is a fabrication designed to keep you on your knees. The real narrative starts with royalty and divine appointment long before any ship sets sail. If the scales ever fell from your eyes and you caught just a glimpse of the specific covenant the Most High cut with your bloodline, the shockwave would shatter the illusions holding this nation together. The fabricated economic structures, the artificial social ladders, and the false identities defining Western civilization would instantly dissolve into dust. The version of America you see on the news today would cease to exist the moment you realized who you actually are. You need to understand that the global elites are not afraid of you rioting or getting angry. They can handle your rage. What makes them lose sleep at night, trembling in their ivory towers, is the terrifying possibility that you might finally wake up and reclaim your birthright. The entire globe is shaking not because they fear your physical strength, but because they are petrified of your spiritual resurrection. The clock is ticking, and we are peeling back the curtain on hundreds of years of strategic memory suppression. I have to warn you, though, the path we are walking down right now is not going to be easy or pleasant. It is going to challenge every comfortable lie you have ever relied on. You will be forced to interrogate every single lesson you learned in school and Sunday service regarding who you are, why you are here, and the very nature of the Creator you worship. My mission here is not merely to drop some facts or give you a history lesson. The objective is to trigger a dormant gene in your soul and spark a spiritual recollection that has been suppressed for generations. We are reaching back to a blood covenant and a divine oath that existed eons before the United States was a thought, long before the transatlantic trade, and ages before they invented the social construct of race to categorize and control. God's people. As we go deeper, you are going to realize that the world you live in is a stage set, a meticulously engineered environment built by architects who desperately need you to remain ignorant. These architects are terrified of the inheritance resting on your shoulders. Do not mistake this for some internet conspiracy theory. We are dealing with documented historical facts and undeniable spiritual realities that explain the state of the world in the year 2026. This truth has been hiding right in front of your face the whole time. Once you digest this, you will never be able to walk into a sanctuary, deposit money in a financial institution, or open a textbook with the same blind trust ever again. Even the face staring back at you in the mirror will look different. You are standing at a crossroads right now. You can hit the snooze button and stay in their matrix, or you can open your eyes and start the work. It is time to construct your own kingdom and reclaim the civilization that was destined to be yours from the beginning. But hold on, before we take another step, you need to confront a critical question. Take a hard look at your daily existence, look at the state of your neighborhood, and analyze the tragic cycles that keep playing out in your family tree like a broken record. Ask yourself honestly, is this struggle and mediocrity really the peak of your potential? Or is there something inside you screaming that this is not the end of the story? Do you truly accept that the climax of your people's ancient journey is just begging for validation and fighting for scraps in a rigged system that was specifically architected to ensure your failure? Or can you hear that low, steady frequency vibrating in your spirit, insisting that you were created for glory and dominion far beyond what this society allows you to imagine? That voice is telling you that this current hardship is just a temporary roadblock, not your final destination. Now, if you think you are just a random biological accident or a helpless victim of bad luck, you might as well click away, because I am not speaking to you. However, if you have a sneaking suspicion that your suffering is actually a breadcrumb trail and your ability to survive is prophetic evidence of your royal status, then buckle up, because you are ready to receive the revelation. You need to wake up to the fact that you are residing within a meticulously fabricated simulation, a psychological prison built to contain you. Imagine walking through a carnival funhouse full of warped glass, where every single angle is engineered to make you look small, twisted, and unrecognizable to your own eyes. Depending on where you look, the media paints you as a dangerous criminal, a helpless beggar, needing a handout, a clown dancing for their amusement, or just a tragic number on the evening news crime ticker. The machine pumps these toxic visuals into your brain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, infiltrating your smartphone, hijacking your television screen, and even poisoning the curriculum in your children's classrooms. The agenda behind this bombardment is chillingly straightforward and brutally effective. They want you so obsessed with these fake identities that you never get a quiet second to look into your own soul and ask the most dangerous question in the world: who am I truly? If the noise stopped, you might remember, and that is why this constant distraction acts as the primary firewall preventing your spiritual awakening. This is a military-grade assault on your focus, because your energy flows wherever your attention goes. The mainstream lie tries to convince you that your timeline started when you were being sold like cattle in a market square. They have conditioned you to look back at your family tree and see only shame, humiliation, and the lowest point of human existence as your genesis. Make no mistake, this is not accidental history. This is calculated psychological warfare designed to break your spirit before you even take your first breath. When they successfully convince you that you were born a slave, they violently amputate your connection to the millennia of glory, innovation, and rulership that defined your people long before captivity. They wipe the hard drive clean, deleting the memory of the pharaohs, the mathematicians, the master builders, and the high priests in your bloodline, handing you a cheap, fragile identity built entirely on being a victim. Why do they do this? Because a victim is always waiting for someone else to save them, begging for approval and hoping for a scrap of charity to survive. But a man or woman who knows they descend from royalty understands that the power to rise comes from within through their connection to the Most High. They do not beg for a folding chair at someone else's banquet. They walk with the confidence of knowing their forefathers cut the wood and carved the table that everyone else is sitting at. This loss of memory is the direct engine driving the poverty and economic struggle you see in our communities today. If you think you came from zero, you will accept zero. You develop a scarcity mentality that keeps you scrambling just to stay alive rather than planning to take over and rule as you were commanded. You end up trading your life for a bi-weekly deposit instead of building empires that will feed your great-grandchildren. But God's covenant with you was never about barely getting by. The true promise is about massive inheritance, occupying the position of the head rather than the tail, and being the lender to many nations while borrowing from none. Just open your eyes and analyze the financial matrix enclosing you. From subprime predatory lending to systemic redlining and unexplained wage disparities, these aren't just unfortunate economic trends or political policy failures. These are the tangible physical weapons of a spiritual war, specifically deployed to ensure you remain the borrower perpetually in debt and servitude to the system. This entire parasitic machine only works as long as you remain asleep to your divine mandate, which commands you to build infrastructure, own the land, and stockpile resources for your descendants down to the fourth generation. Pay close attention to the vocabulary they use to label you in the year 2026. They love to brand you with the term minority. Think about the psychological impact of that word. It literally defines you as minor, meaning smaller, lesser, and insignificant compared to the majority. Society loves to brand you with terminology that implies a natural deficit, slapping a sticker on your chest that reads underprivileged. This is a strategic linguistic trap designed to convince you that your default setting is poverty and that you desperately need the benevolent handouts of the ruling class just to survive. They categorize you as disenfranchised, a word carefully chosen to highlight what has been stolen from you, rather than the dormant, explosive power you hold to enfranchise yourself. You must realize that every single sociological tag they place on you is a mental prison cell. These terms serve as a persistent, low-frequency signal reminding you of a supposed second-class existence. By nodding along and accepting these definitions, you are essentially signing the contract of your own subjugation without reading the fine print. Eventually, a tragic shift occurs in your psyche where you start viewing your own reflection through the distorted lens of the very system that designed the architecture of your oppression. Your struggle devolves into a game of semantics where you fight to trade one derogatory label for a slightly politer one instead of burning their entire dictionary and writing your own narrative. We have seen this cycle play out before in the corridors of history. It is a direct reverberation of an ancient sacred narrative that has been looping for thousands of years. Cast your mind back to the children of Israel dwelling in the shadow of the Egyptian Empire. After 400 years of crushing servitude, a spiritual amnesia had set in. They had completely lost the memory of their royal lineage. These were the direct bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the rightful inheritors of a covenant with the Creator. Yet when they looked in the mirror, they saw nothing but disposable labor and property of the state. Their entire sense of self was inextricably bound to the mud and straw of the brick kilns, measuring their worth by how well they could build Pharaoh's treasure cities. When Moses arrived carrying the heavy frequency of liberation and a divine mandate, the people did not rejoice. They recoiled in terror and doubt. The whip they knew felt safer than the liberty they could not imagine, proving that trauma often feels more comfortable than the unknown risks of destiny. You are currently standing at that exact same spiritual and psychological intersection today. You have been systematically programmed to find a strange solace in the struggle itself, deriving your identity from being an eternal combatant against modern-day pharaohs rather than stepping into your birthright as the chosen people of the Most High. The Matrix has perfected the science of harvesting your emotional energy. It strategically feeds you designated villains to despise and elevates tragic martyrs for you to weep over, controlling your emotional thermostat. It keeps you trapped in a hamster wheel of reaction forever, responding to the most recent police brutality video, the latest unfair court ruling, or the newest viral injustice. This is a treadmill of indignation that feels productive because you are sweating, but in reality you are not moving a single inch toward true sovereignty. While you are exhausting yourself marching through the streets, creating trending hashtags and pleading for fairness from a corrupt beast system that was never designed to give it to you, the actual mechanisms of control remain completely unthreatened. Your vital, spiritual, and emotional reserves are being siphoned off, wasted on battling the visible symptoms of the infection, while the underlying disease continues to rot the body politic from the inside out. The ancient covenant is summoning you to a much more sophisticated plane of warfare and existence in this season of 2026. It demands that you cease petitioning the current power structure for validation and instead channel all that force into constructing a parallel kingdom based on divine laws that renders the old corrupt order completely irrelevant. Furthermore, the adversary has weaponized your greatest strength, your compassion, and turned it into a tool for your own containment. You are indoctrinated with the belief that your highest purpose is to be the moral conscience of the nation, to march for everyone else's rights, and to constantly forgive those who destroy you so they can find their own peace of mind. You have been cast as the perpetual sign-eater for a sick culture forced to metabolize the toxicity of a society that hates you. But let me be clear, the promise was never for you to be the spiritual janitors of another man's establishment, scrubbing away the stain of his moral failures. The authentic promise is that you are the architects and inhabitants of your own sanctuary, living under your own vine and fig tree. Your primary ministry and obligation are to your own bloodline. Your top priority must be the healing of your own trauma, the restoration of your families, and the fortification of your own communities. It is impossible to pour liberation from a vessel that is bone dry. For centuries, you have been decanting your precious spiritual oil into a bucket riddled with holes, wondering why you are always empty. So what is this promise we speak of? Do not mistake it for a poetic metaphor or a religious allegory. This is not some emotional hymn to sing within the four walls of a church to numb the pain of your reality. It is a binding divine contract, a heritage that demands physical, tangible manifestation in the three-dimensional world. The core of the promise is rooted in the ownership of territory and the absolute power of self-determination. It speaks of birthing a nation, a community so distinct and superior in its culture, jurisprudence, and economics that it stands as an undeniable beacon of order in a chaotic world. It is about eating the fruit from vineyards you planted with your own hands, sleeping in homes where you hold the deed, and drinking fresh water from wells that you dug yourself. It envisions a reality where your children are educated on their pre-slavery greatness, where your men are respected as kings and protectors, and where your women are revered as the womb and wisdom of the nation. This is a comprehensive blueprint for holistic restoration that covers every sector of existence: spiritual alignment, cultural integrity, financial sovereignty, and political autonomy. You can see the fingerprints of this divine destiny written all over your supernatural ability to bounce back from annihilation. Look at the history books and ask yourself what other group of humans could endure 400 years of the most sadistic chattel slavery the world has ever known, followed by a century of domestic terrorism under Jim Crow, followed by decades of systemic economic exclusion, and not only survive but thrive enough to set the tempo for the entire planet. Your sonic vibrations, your visual arts, your fashion sense, and your linguistic flair. These are the undisputed rulers of global culture. Do you think it is a coincidence that the world mimics your walk while ignoring your plight? This relentless wellspring of creativity is not just talent, it is the direct evidence of the divine spark of the Creator residing in your DNA. It is the promise of God screaming to be heard, pushing through the concrete pavement of oppression like a dandelion that refuses to die. Your very existence is a statistical impossibility. Your ability to create beauty from ashes is a prophetic act. Now, there are cynics who will say that focusing on these ancient biblical covenants is just a form of escapism, a way to avoid the harsh facts of the real world. But that perspective is fatally flawed. This promise is not about running away from reality. It is about overriding it with a superior truth. It is about transmutation. It is the ultimate operating system for reshaping the physical world to align with the spiritual blueprint. True faith is not closing your eyes and pretending the obstacles aren't there. It is opening your spiritual vision to see a higher law that supersedes the limited facts on the ground. The visible facts may say you are outnumbered, outgunned, and lacking resources, but the truth says those are merely conditions for a miracle. Listen closely, because the fundamental reality you need to grasp is that you possess a birthright that predates current civilization. You are the direct beneficiary of an ancient blood-sworn agreement with the architect of the cosmos, and that means the entire treasury of heaven isn't just watching you, it is waiting on your command. The second you flip the switch and start moving based on who you actually are, rather than what the 6 o'clock news tells you is possible. The physical matrix we live in has no option but to reshuffle the deck to align with your authority. Now, let's pump the brakes for a second and keep it 100% real with each other, because I know this isn't the first time someone has tried to hype you up with deep spiritual talk. You have sat in pews for decades listening to charismatic leaders promise you a golden mansion on the other side of the grave, but you need to realize that this theology was specifically engineered to turn your heritage into a ghost story, keeping you quiet, submissive, and sedated right here in 2026. It is honestly the greatest hustle ever run on a specific group of people in human history, a psychological operation designed to disarm you by deferring your rewards to the afterlife. They bamboozled you into swapping your claim to physical territory, banking systems, legislative control, and generational assets for a ticket to heaven, leaving them with the deed to the earth while you are left satisfied with nothing but a tambourine and a good emotional cry on Sunday morning. You need to understand that the Creator is the God of the living, breathing, acting reality, not a deity of the graveyard or the funeral home. Go back to the text. The covenant established with Abraham wasn't about floating on clouds with harps. It was a geopolitical contract regarding his bloodline, seizing and holding specific territories. We are talking about physical, tangible real estate. When you recite the Lord's Prayer, you are asking for the kingdom to manifest right here on the pavement exactly as it operates in the spiritual realm. Yet you have been scammed into ignoring the first and most dangerous part of that: decree. Therefore, your first step toward true liberation is to revolutionize the way you speak to the Most High. Quit begging the Creator to give you the strength to tolerate your oppression or merely survive the struggle. Flip the script and start demanding the architectural blueprints, the tactical insight, and the lion-hearted courage required to dismantle this system and construct a new civilization from the ground up. Cease your petitions for a slightly larger slice of a poisoned, corrupt economic pie, and instead pray for the agricultural knowledge to grow the wheat and the industrial capacity to bake your own loaf of bread. For too long, your spiritual life has been stuck in a defensive crouch, programmed to ask for meager provisions and safety while trapped inside a prison yard built by your enemies. It is time to switch your spiritual frequency to an offensive war footing, a mindset of total dominion and aggressive reclamation where you demand high-level strategies from heaven. You need to be praying for economic schematics and the supernatural recovery of every single asset, idea, and resource that was plundered from your bloodline over the last 400 years. Approach the throne of grace not like a battered servant hoping the master won't hit him today, but like an exiled monarch coordinating the invasion that will restore him to his rightful seat of power. However, before you can advance, you have to square up and face the gatekeepers. Those specific agents and structural roadblocks that cash checks based on you remaining spiritually comatose. Do not be deceived into thinking the enemy is only external. These agents operate both outside the walls and more dangerously right inside your own neighborhoods and sanctuaries. I am talking about the political figureheads who barter your collective voting leverage for photo ops and private access, and the pulpit pimps who preach a sedated gospel of toxic forgiveness while ignoring the biblical mandate for justice. I am talking about the suits in the music and film industry who cut checks to rappers and actors to glorify dysfunction, drug use, and fratricide, broadcasting our lowest moments as culture to the world. Look at the ivory tower academics who write tenures and dissertations analyzing your trauma under a microscope, yet never seem to produce a single tangible plan to end the condition they study. These people are working around the clock not to cure the disease but to manage the symptoms, because if you ever actually got well and stood up, their relevance and their revenue streams would evaporate overnight. You have to get sharp and identify them by the results they produce, not the smooth rhetoric they speak. Take a hard look at the massive economies that have been constructed on the foundation of black stagnation. We are witnessing a sprawling nonprofit industrial complex, a diversity, equity, inclusion hustle, and a poverty-pimping political machine that eats off your plate. These are not charities. These are multi-billion-dollar conglomerates that absolutely require you to stay oppressed, broke, and confused just to justify their quarterly budgets and payrolls. Please understand that the system is not broken, it is working exactly as intended. These organizations were never designed to solve the problem, they were designed to curate it. They toss you crumbs in the form of grants, pilot programs, and endless initiatives that create the optical illusion of forward movement. But they fundamentally refuse to touch the root cause of the rot. The core issue is a specific group of people who have been severed from their creator, their true history, and their supernatural power source. Because if you reconnected to that, you would put the entire poverty industry out of business. Consequently, they have a massive financial incentive to keep you viewing yourself as a helpless victim who needs a caseworker rather than a chosen vessel carrying a divine promise that needs to be executed. Now, whenever you bring this up, the gaslighting begins with the standard rebuttal. Why are you living in the past? Slavery ended in 1865. They tell you to get over it and move on, but recognize this for what it is. A calculated tactic of dismissal meant to invalidate the ground you are standing on. Right now in 2026, let's dismantle that logic right now. When a trust fund baby inherits a portfolio from a great-grandfather who amassed it through ruthless exploitation or free labor, does anyone accuse that heir of living in the past? Absolutely not. That is considered a present-day asset, a tangible reality, where that wealth is working for them this very second. The compound interest on that advantage is real, and by the exact same laws of economics, the systemic disadvantages, the theft of land, the redlining, the denial of capital that were legislated against you did not just magically evaporate because the Civil Rights Act was signed in 1964. Those deficits compound and multiply over generations just like interest in a bank account, only in the red. We are not asking you to set up camp in the past, but you must have the intellectual honesty to understand how the past is actively occupying the present. You are not chained to history. You are attempting to recover from a multi-generational wound. And another major trap laid out for you during this recovery is the weaponization of the word unity. Society tries to guilt-trip you into believing that focusing exclusively on the upliftment of your own bloodline is divisive or reverse racist, pressuring you to build bridges and sing Kumbaya before you have even secured your own foundation. But pay very close attention to the demographics of the people demanding this unconditional inclusiveness from you. It is usually the very people who have never once stood in the trenches with you when the fire was hot. They demand a spirit of universalism, and we are the world from you, while they strictly practice tribalism and gatekeeping for themselves behind closed doors. Every other ethnicity in America is permitted and frankly applauded for building their own banks, schools, and networks, practicing group economics, and putting their own children first. You are the only demographic on the planet where the basic instinct of self-preservation and self-love is branded as hatred toward others. The biblical covenant is specific to a distinct people, and your primary mandate is to rebuild the walls of your own house and restore the glory of your own nation before trying to save everyone else. Only once you are a strong, healthy, and autonomous nation can you truly be a blessing to the rest of humanity, because you cannot effectively bless anybody when you are operating from a position of brokenness and begging. This inheritance is encoded in the DNA of the scriptures, but you have been conditioned to read your own mail through the distorted lens of Eurocentric theology that was designed to make you a servant in your own story. Walk into almost any cathedral or historic chapel in the West, and you are immediately bombarded with the same visual programming. A European Messiah, Nordic disciples, and seraphim that look like they hail from Scandinavia rather than the Near East. We have to understand that this imagery isn't just an artistic preference or a Renaissance remnant. It is a calculated instrument of psychological warfare designed to embed a racial hierarchy into the human psyche, subtly suggesting that holiness, supreme power, and ultimate truth are the exclusive property of those with pale skin. It creates a devastating spiritual dissonance, forcing you to bow your knee and pour out your soul to a deity who bears the exact physical resemblance of the very people who historically put your ancestors in chains. To truly unlock the inheritance promised to you, you have to snatch the scriptures back from the grip of colonial interpretation and realize this is a saga about a melanated Afro-Asiatic lineage fighting for survival and freedom against the superpowers of the ancient world, the imperial machines of Egypt, Babylon, and Rome. This narrative belongs to you. The Bible is not and never was a document of Western civilization or European folklore. It is the tangible historical and spiritual diary of your forefathers, a blood-stained record of your lineage. And until you can look at those pages and see your own reflection in the text, you remain blind to your true potential. And this realization leads us directly to the smoking gun of biblical prophecy, the undeniable fingerprint that identifies the true children of the promise, the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy. You need to open that book and study those verses with your own eyes, stripping away the watered-down explanations given to you by mainstream theology that tries to spiritualize away the literal pain. That chapter draws a line in the sand outlining a glorious destiny of abundance for adherence to divine law, followed by a terrifyingly specific list of generational curses that would befall the people if they turned their backs on their Creator. These ancient verses describe a specific group of people who would be dragged into captivity by way of cargo ships, sold on auction blocks to their enemies, and left in a state where no other nation would intervene to redeem or save them. It speaks of a people who would be stripped of their indigenous names, disconnected from their tribal heritage, reduced to racial slurs and stereotypes, watching their sons and daughters snatched away to serve others constantly, themselves at the bottom of the societal totem pole rather than in positions of power. You have to look in the mirror and ask yourself a difficult, honest question. When we look at the timeline of human history, who is the only group that matches this resume of suffering? Who else on this planet fits this prophetic identification card with such chilling precision that it reads like a history textbook of the transatlantic experience? Understanding this is not meant to crush you with guilt or condemnation. Rather, it is the ultimate wake-up call, a message of identification that tells you exactly who you are. These generational curses are not the finale of your existence. They are the breadcrumbs left by the divine, the forensic evidence pointing you back to your stolen birthright. If you are the descendants of the people who lived through the horror of those curses, then by the laws of logic and scripture, you are also the rightful heirs to whom the covenant blessings and the original promises were made. It is two sides of the same prophetic coin. While the global system has weaponized your trauma to label you as inferior or cursed by circumstance, the Most High uses it as a badge of authenticity. The Creator is using your history as a marker of identity, a divine signal flare guiding you back to your royal status, and once this truth settles in your spirit, your entire worldview transforms. Suddenly, the struggle isn't just senseless victimhood or bad luck. It is prophetic fulfillment confirming that you are the protagonist of the story. And here is the hope: if the prophecies regarding the destruction and the curses were fulfilled to the letter, then the prophecies regarding your rise, restoration, and redemption must also come to pass with the same absolute certainty. So, as we navigate through 2026, what does this restoration actually look like in a practical modern context? It isn't about wearing ancient robes or retreating to the desert. It is about taking those ancient, immutable principles of divine law and applying them to the technological and social reality of the 21st century, starting with a radical decolonization of the mind. You have to stop operating with the psychology of a minority fighting for scraps and start moving with the psychology of a sovereign nation, understanding that a nation manages its own production, distribution, and wealth. A true nation controls its own broadcasting, enforces its own moral code, and educates its own offspring. You must begin the heavy lifting of building these infrastructures for yourselves, by yourselves, without asking for permission. This movement isn't about segregation rooted in hatred of others. It is about self-preservation rooted in a deep, restorative love for your own reflection. You are constructing an ark of safety not because you despise those drowning in the chaos of the world, but because you have a mandate to love and protect the remnant that God has entrusted to your care. From an economic standpoint, this requires a revolutionary pivot toward cooperative economics and closing the leakage in our financial reservoir. It means making a conscious, disciplined choice to circulate your currency within your own zip codes and businesses multiple times before allowing a single cent to leave your community. We need to launch enterprises not merely to buy luxury cars, but to solve the logistical and social issues plaguing our neighborhoods and to provide dignity and wages to our own brothers and sisters. It demands that we pool our capital to acquire tangible assets, buying back the block, securing acres of farmland, owning the apartment complexes, and seizing control of the food supply chain from seed to table. The biblical promise has always been tied to the land, and as long as you remain a permanent class of renters, paying off someone else's mortgage, you will remain a permanent servant class in the global economy. True wealth isn't just having high income or flash. It's about ownership, equity, and passing down assets, requiring you to shift from a consumer mindset to an owner mindset. The collective spending power you hold is a sleeping economic giant, and the prophecy calls for that giant to wake up and flex its muscles. Regarding education, there is an urgent need to take full custody of your children's intellectual development because the state-run school system often functions as a preparatory ground for the penitentiary or a factory for creating obedient workers. The current curriculum indoctrinates your youth with a version of history that erases their greatness, teaching them to admire their conquerors while preparing them for a future of subservience. You must establish your own academies, from early learning centers to universities that download the truth of their ancestry into their spirits. We need institutions that instill a sense of divine aristocracy in our youth, equipping them with the technical and leadership skills necessary to govern, build, and sustain independent communities. The curriculum must include aggressive financial literacy, business ownership, and the application of divine law to modern governance. You are raising the architects and monarchs of a future kingdom, and their education must reflect the weight of that crown. Stop handing over your most valuable assets, the minds of your children, to a system that has proven time and again it does not love them or have their best interests at heart. On the cultural front, you must cease the desperate quest for validation from the mainstream and stop creating content solely for their applause. For centuries, your creative spirit, your rhythm, and your style have been packaged, patented, and sold back to you in a watered-down, toxic format that destroys your own community. You are the engine of global pop culture, yet you own almost none of the distribution channels, the manufacturing plants, or the revenue streams generated by your genius. The time has come to build your own streaming platforms, fund your own film studios, and develop your own social networks where censorship cannot touch the truth. This sovereignty will allow you to control the narrative, tell your stories without a filter, and promote images that heal the trauma of your people rather than perpetuating the stereotypes that keep them in chains. The ancient covenant promised that you would be a blazing beacon to the nations, a guide for the lost. But how can you possibly fulfill that destiny if you are suffocating your light under the basket of a media empire owned by men who despise your existence? This radical pivot in your mindset, this refusal to be defined by others, is the actual living definition of repentance. If you go back to the original Greek text, the word repent doesn't just mean weeping at an altar or feeling guilty about your mistakes. It signifies times metanoia, times a complete and total transformation of your mental framework. It demands that you dismantle and reconstruct the way you view your own soul, the geopolitical landscape, and the Most High. You have to apologize to your spirit for swallowing the deceptions fed to you by your oppressors for centuries. You need to turn away from the self-sabotaging belief that you are merely a minority, a statistical footnote in a land your ancestors built from the ground up. You must repent for looking for a savior in the voting booth or seeking deliverance through the corrupted religious systems that were designed to keep you captive. You have placed your trust in fallible humans instead of the unshakable covenant of the Creator. This internal deprogramming is the prerequisite. You cannot change the external world until you fix the internal brokenness. I won't lie to you. This journey is going to be brutal. It demands a level of sacrifice and ironclad self-discipline that most people aren't ready to give. It means walking away from the cheap entertainment and the dopamine hits the system feeds you to keep you sedated, distracted, and compliant. There will be a tax on this truth. You might lose lifelong friends and business opportunities that are rooted in that old, slave-minded mentality. You will be misunderstood by the masses. Get ready for the labels. They will brand you as a radical, call you divisive, and maybe even accuse you of hate speech just for loving yourself. You need to armor up for that reality. Remember the Exodus. Pharaoh never opens the gates and waves goodbye out of the kindness of his heart. When you embrace your royal identity, you become an existential threat to the control grid and the empire will strike back. The real test of your faith isn't coming on Sunday morning. It is happening in the corporate boardroom, at the heated school board meetings, and during uncomfortable conversations at your own family dinner table. Now, we have to have a hard conversation about the elephant in the room, the modern church system. Historically, the Black church was the heartbeat of the culture, a safe harbor when the storms of the world were trying to drown us. But in 2026, you need to audit these institutions. How many are just localized franchises of the control system? They sell you a fantasy of pie in the sky while the bishops and pastors are living like royalty right here on earth. How many of these pulpits are programming you to have more compassion for your enemies than you do for your own Black sons and daughters? How many encourage you to pray for the success of a system that is actively grinding you into dust rather than teaching you the blueprints to construct your own kingdom? It is time to demand a theology that liberates your mind and your pockets, not just one that pacifies your spirit. We don't need more eloquent speakers. We need architects and kingdom builders. We need sanctuaries that double as economic think tanks and nation-building headquarters, not just social clubs where you go to release emotional pressure before returning to the plantation. If you want to understand this specific moment in history, look at the biblical archetype of the 12 spies. Moses dispatched 12 tribal leaders to recon the territory. Every single one of them saw the abundance, the agriculture, the resources, the land flowing with milk and honey. The opportunity was undeniable. However, they also spotted the giants in the land. 10 of those leaders came back paralyzed by what they saw, carrying a report dripping with cowardice. They cried out, "The opposition is massive. We look like insects compared to them. There is no way we can conquer this territory." They were fixated on the barrier rather than the objective. But then you had Joshua and Caleb, spirits of a different breed. They declared, "Their protection has been stripped away. The Most High is riding with us." They said, "Fear nothing. We are well able to devour this land." Their eyes were locked on the covenant, not the conflict. Fast forward to right now. You are standing on the precipice of your destiny, and when you look at the landscape, all you see are the giants. You see the colossal structures of systemic racism, the specter of police brutality, the wealth gap and a rigged judicial system, and the fearful chatter of the 10 spies is blasting in your ears. That negative report comes from the mainstream media, anchors the spineless politicians and the compromised preachers who want you to stay in your place. It is the whisper of your own insecurity convincing you that the system is too big to fail and that you are too insignificant to make a dent. They need you to view yourself as a grasshopper. They want you to stay wandering in the wilderness of struggle. Because, let's be honest, the struggle is familiar and safe to you. Here is the harsh reality: that entire generation who co-signed the report of fear died in the desert. They were buried without ever tasting the promise. Today you have a binary choice to make. Are you going to believe the statistics of the giants or the report of the living God? I'm not saying the giants aren't there. The systemic opposition is tangible. But the covenant, is a higher reality. That land is your birthright. Those giants are merely illegal squatters on property that has your name on the deed. Your destiny has never been contingent on how scary your enemy looks. It is determined solely by the magnitude of your God. You must aggressively mute the fear-mongering of the 10 spies and turn up the volume on the Joshua and Caleb frequency in your soul. You have to look right through the obstacles and visualize the harvest, the heavy clusters of grapes waiting for you. See the milk and the honey. Start walking and talking with the swagger of an owner because, according to the divine contract, you already hold the title. Let's clarify exactly what we mean when we say that America is never going back to normal. We aren't talking about taking up arms or seeking some crude racial revenge. That is a low-level interpretation from people who only understand power through the lens of physical domination. The transformation approaching is seismic. It is spiritual, structural, and absolute. We are discussing a total paradigm shift. When you fully awaken to who you are, you simply withdraw your consent from the current system. You stop fueling the machine with your hard-earned dollars, your brilliance, and your energy. A system designed to exploit you collapses the moment you stop volunteering to be exploited. You don't need to light a match to burn the structure down. You just have to stop using your back to hold it up. Picture this scenario. Imagine millions of awakened black men and women simultaneously moving their capital out of predatory corporate banks and depositing it into black-owned credit unions. Visualize a sweeping strategic movement where we stop renting from the oppressors and start owning the block, reclaiming the very soil and assets in our neighborhoods that our ancestors built. Picture the power of unplugging from the propaganda machine of mainstream television and tuning solely into black-owned media networks that actually feed your spirit and amplify your cultural values. Envision a new generation of sons and daughters educated in sovereign schools, where they are taught they are kings and queens, not statistics. This is not a daydream. This is the tactical blueprint for our survival. The old system does not fall because we attacked it from the outside. It crumbles into irrelevance because we built a superior God-ordained kingdom economy right beside it that made them obsolete. The most massive shift of wealth and dominion in the history of mankind will not happen because we marched with signs, but because we finally aligned ourselves with the laws of the Most High. Listen closely to me, young warrior. If you are feeling crushed by the madness and despair of this world, the destiny on your life is infinitely heavier and more glorious than the pain you are carrying right now. You are not dropped into the timeline of 2026 by accident. You were handpicked by the Creator to stand on the front lines for such a pivotal time as this. Do not let them trick you into thinking your life is just about clocking in, paying taxes, and dying. You are a sovereign builder called to be a restorer of the breach. That fire in your belly isn't meant for the club or for internet beef. That is the raw, creative fuel given to you by God to build a new civilization. You are holding technological weapons and accessing historical truths in the palm of your hand that our forefathers prayed for with tears in their eyes. The prophecy requires your hands, your intellect, and your spirit. Stop trading your divine birthright for the cheap, fleeting entertainment of a world that is passing away. You are here to construct the future, and to the elders watching who are tired of the same old cycles and weary from the decades of struggle, do not dare sit down now. The mission is not finished. The scars you bear and the wisdom you have accumulated are the most valuable currency our community possesses right now. You are the living bridge connecting us to our roots and the navigator for where we are going. You must teach these young lions the true history that was systematically removed from the textbooks. It is your duty to stand as a pillar, modeling what unshakable dignity, iron discipline, and rock-solid faith look like in the flesh. There is no retirement plan in a spiritual war. You are being promoted to a 5-star general in this army of restoration. Do not let past heartbreaks turn into bitterness. The fact that you are still standing is a miracle, and you must now pass the baton of that survival along with the strategy you learned to the runners coming up behind you. I am talking to the business owners, the heavy hitters, and the entrepreneurs who are building empires in the marketplace. To the professionals, realize that your career is not just about your bank account. Your enterprise is a sovereign embassy of the coming kingdom planted in foreign territory. Your business must become a sanctuary of employment, a training ground for greatness, and a standard of absolute excellence. You have a divine mandate to use your capital and your clout to bankroll this revolution, funding the independent schools, the media networks, and the land acquisition projects. Your financial success was never meant to be just a personal luxury. It is a resource for the liberation of the entire tribe. You have to shift your perspective from trying to make it individually to a mindset of collective economic power and group economics. Stop asking how much profit can I make and start asking how many of my people can I liberate with this money. Your bottom line must be measured in freedom. To the rappers, the poets, the painters, and the creators, understand that you are the prophets and visionaries who hold the keys to the subconscious mind of our people. For way too long, the enemy has used your immense talent to push a culture of death, glorifying murder, materialism, and the degradation of our women. You must make a conscious decision right now to flip the script and use your art to breathe life back into dry bones. Compose the anthems that inspire liberation. Paint the vivid pictures of the glorious kingdom we are marching toward. Produce the films that reveal our true history and identity. You are the ones who can make the prophecy feel real, showing the people what true freedom actually looks like. What you create is not just content for a feed. It is spiritual warfare for the soul of a generation. You are either laying bricks for the kingdom of God or mixing mortar for the beast system of Babylon with your talent. There is no middle ground. Let us be real about the price of staying blind. What happens if you hit ignore on this call? The curses and the trauma loops will just keep spinning, destroying us. We will lose yet another generation to the concrete of the prison yard, the street corner, and a life devoid of meaning. You will continue to top the charts in every negative category: poverty, heart disease, incarceration, while staying dead last in ownership and wealth. You will remain a political football, used by politicians to get elected every 4 years and then tossed aside like trash once the votes are counted. Your neighborhoods will keep getting gentrified until you are pushed out, and your culture will continue to be stolen, packaged, and sold back to you at a premium. Worst of all, your children will grow up looking in the mirror and wishing they were anyone else but who God made them to be. The ultimate price of rejecting this promise is living a hollow plastic life that is a shadow of your potential and handing down a legacy of spiritual bankruptcy to your descendants. The choice is crystal clear and staring you in the face. You can keep begging for a seat at a table in a system that has proven for 400 years that it wants to destroy you. You can keep putting your faith in politicians who give you empty speeches, in celebrities who sold you out for a check, and in a watered-down religion that keeps you sedated and asleep. Or you can make the radical decision. You can choose to believe the Creator's report. You can choose to see yourself as He sees you, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a set-apart people. You can choose to walk away from the house of bondage and start the difficult, rugged journey toward the promised land that is your birthright. This spiritual awakening is erupting all across this country and spreading to the 4 corners of the earth. The sleepers are waking up. Families are snatching their children out of public indoctrination centers. They are launching their own businesses and taking back control. Right now, all across the country, people are quietly carving out their own sanctuaries and forming sovereign circles. They are dissecting the ancient scrolls for themselves, stripping away centuries of indoctrination to uncover the truth. Understand that this is not some corporate structure with a CEO barking orders from a skyscraper. This is a wildfire spreading from the roots up a decentralized spiritual insurgency that operates under the radar. No human hand can stifle this momentum because it does not rely on a charismatic figurehead to survive. This is the hand of the Most High moving across the chessboard of history. The only variable remaining is where you stand. Will you be the generation that finally possesses the birthright? Or will you be just another statistic that perishes in the wilderness of doubt and fear? So, how do you actually initiate this shift? It begins with a quiet, radical resolve in the privacy of your own mind. You make a hard decision to reject the psychological price tag society has pinned on you. You choose to educate yourself. Kill the signal on the television and pick up a book. You need to dig into your lineage looking way past the year 1619. Analyze the scriptures through the lens of your ancestors, not through the filter of the colonizers. Master the principles of economics. Memorize the statutes of the law. You must transform yourselves into the most intellectually sharp, strategically literate group of people on the face of the earth. Information is merely the key that unlocks the shackles. Action is what removes them. You have to pivot your behavior. Be militant about where every single dollar flows from your wallet. Audit everything you consume, from the food on your plate to the media you let seep into your subconscious. Revolutionize the vocabulary you use to describe your reflection and your kin. Let your speech carry the weight and authority of royalty, never the whimpering of a victim. Once your mind is right, you must link shields with those on the same frequency. This mission is too heavy for a solo carrier. Scout out the awake souls in your zip code who are ready to build. Organize heavy-hitting study circles. Establish investment groups to pool capital. Launch cooperative enterprises that we own. Plant community gardens to feed our own. You must reconstruct the Black family as the unshakable fortress of your nation. The current system maintains its dominance solely by keeping you fragmented, isolated, and suspicious of one another. Your true power is unlocked when you synchronize around a singular vision and a divine purpose. This unity cannot be based on shared trauma. It must be anchored in a shared, glorious destiny. It has to be a unity cemented by the solid rock of the ancient covenant that cannot be broken. Now, the critics will hear this message and scream that it is divisive. They will attempt to rebrand your call for self-preservation and dignity as a narrative of hostility toward others. Do not take the bait. This movement has absolutely nothing to do with hating another group of people. It is about finally, unapologetically falling in love with your own existence. It is about executing the divine mandate that was placed on your bloodline before time began. A builder who is focused on laying the foundation of his own estate does not have the spare time to dismantle his neighbor's fence. Your eyes must be locked like a laser on the work of restoration. When you are completely secure in your identity and confident in your inheritance, you have no reason to harbor fear or animosity toward anyone else. Your rising prosperity will speak for itself, standing as a monument to the power of the Creator, drawing the nations not to worship you but to respect the God you serve. The transformation is happening right now in the year 2026. It is a metamorphosis of the spirit, a complete recalibration of your sight. You have to look at the world not through the lens of what is, but through the prophetic lens of what must be. You have to stare at a crumbling block in the inner city and visualize rows of pristine Black-owned estates and thriving commerce. You have to look at a group of young men drifting on a street corner and see the raw material for future patriarchs, husbands, and community leaders. You have to look in the mirror, ignoring the scars of the past and the whispers of doubt, and see the very image of the Most High, the offspring of dynasty, the heir to a promise that is legally binding in the courts of heaven. Your vision is the prophecy. Whatever you can conceive in your spirit is what you will manifest in the natural. America will never be the same because its social architecture rests on a lie about your value. The entire economic and social hierarchy of this nation depends on you agreeing to stay at the bottom. The moment you revoke that agreement, you shatter the foundation of the American caste system. You are not a minority begging for civil rights. You are a sovereign nation within a nation rising to claim your divine station. When you start building your own infrastructure and living by your own code, you become a power player. The establishment knows how to handle your marches and your hashtags. They can absorb your anger, but they are terrified of your independence. They cannot handle your economic and spiritual exodus from their matrix. That is the reckoning that is knocking at the door. The world is not holding its breath for a new politician or a government program to rescue you. Creation itself is groaning, waiting for you to remember your name. The leverage to shift your reality is not found in the White House or the state capitol. It is located in your house, in your mindset, and in your spirit. The promise is not a physical place you are trying to travel to. It is a spiritual identity you are waiting to put on. It is not something you need to campaign for, protest for, or cast a ballot for. It is a reality you simply need to accept, visualize, and occupy. The prison door is not locked. You have been standing inside an open cage for centuries, paralyzed by the illusion of captivity. Today, open your eyes and see the contract. See the covenant. Visualize the future that is your birthright. See the kingdom that you have been commissioned to construct. Let that vision incinerate every trace of fear, anxiety, and division. Let it become the central organizing principle of your entire existence. Let every move you make, from how you invest your time to how you allocate your capital, be strictly aligned with that master vision. This is the magnum opus of our era. This is biblical prophecy unfolding in real time. The giants in the land are real, but the promise is the ultimate truth. The world will never be the same again. Not because you tore it down, but because you finally remembered who you are and started to build your own. We stand at a critical crossroads, and right now you are faced with the most important decision of your lifetime. You have the option to scroll away from this truth, to plug yourself back into the matrix of distractions, to return to the exhausting treadmill of manufactured outrage, and to slip back into the comfortable drug-induced slumber of a servant in modern Babylon. Or you can choose to inhale deeply, steel your spirit, and commit yourself to the real labor. The rigorous work of studying history, the painful work of healing trauma, the constructive work of nation building, and the humble work of true and repentance. Final verdict rests entirely in your hands. No one else can cast this vote for you. But understand this reality: your destiny is banging on the door. The ancient promise is waiting for you to claim it. The spirits of your ancestors, those who endured the yoke of iron, are watching from the cloud of witnesses. Furthermore, the survival of your unborn children depends entirely on the move you make in this moment. What reality will you choose to perceive through the fog of deception? What kind of kingdom are you preparing to construct? The future existence of an entire people group rests upon your answer today. Let this be a prophetic decree over your life and your bloodline. You are not a victim of the system. You are a victor over it. You are not a minority as they label you. You belong to a royal priesthood and a holy nation. You are not merely a crime statistic or a census number. You are a living sign and a biblical wonder to the nations. You are not cursed to remain at the bottom. You are the rightful heir to a divine covenant made with your forefathers. The mental and spiritual chains are shattering this very second. Your mind is being washed and renewed by the truth. Your spiritual vision is being restored to 2020 clarity. You are destined to be the head leading the way and never again the tail dragging behind. You are positioned above, only rising to the top, and never again beneath the feet of your oppressors. You will lend resources to many nations, but you will not need to borrow a dime from any of them. The accumulated wealth of the wicked is simply being stored up for you to collect. Your children will be mighty giants in the land, fearing nothing. No weapon formed against you, legislative, economic, or physical, shall ever prosper, and every tongue that rises to accuse you in judgment, you shall have the divine authority to condemn. This is your heritage as a servant of the Most High. This is the promise written in your DNA. See the vision, believe the word, and get to work building it. Please understand that this message is specifically curated for the spiritual awakening and mental empowerment of a particular people, strictly according to the scriptures. This is not a manifesto of racial superiority, nor is it a broadcast designed to spread hatred or malice toward any other group of people on the earth. Our sole purpose is the holistic healing and total restoration of a people who have survived a 400-year assault on their identity, serving as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy in these latter days. When true restoration comes to this specific part of the human family, it acts as the catalyst that ultimately contributes to the healing and balance of the entire world.